You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio, man. We are here once again, and we have another amazing show today, man. We're going to talk to someone that's going to help us learn a little bit more about OCD treatment and just, man, the mindset. We all need that healthy, positive mindset and overcome those barriers that just drain us. So, man, our guest for today is Zach Westerbeck, and he has an amazing website you can check out at zachwesterbeck.com. Shout out to Purdue, man. He's representing the Purdue family Boilermakers stand up. Man, first and foremost, I want to say, Zach, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Shamaya. Thank you so much for having me on the show, man. And I appreciate that Boilermaker shout out. It's we're riding that number one wave despite the loss over the weekend. So I'm just excited that I guess the coaches for the AP polls think that we're still the number one team in the nation. We'll see. We'll see come tourney time.
Man, you're doing a lot better than Toledo Rockets. I know they're gonna be mad at me saying that, but it's the truth. But man, your book, You're Not Alone. You put that out there recently, and I've been watching it. I've been watching things, do my homework, and it's been getting a lot of great feedback, a lot of positive feedback. And I've seen you be on many, many, many different platforms talking about your story and just talking about what inspired you to write this book. Man, today's topic, we're going to kind of zone in on OCD. But before we do all that, kind of give the audience a little bit of picture of who is Zach and how did you find yourself in writing this book?
Yeah, absolutely, Shamaya. And I've been talking about this now for 5 years, and still to this day, it's such a joy to be able to be in this line of work and talk about mental health, or what I call brain health broadly from a societal level, and then also be able to talk specifically about OCD and that specific brain disorder, which in today's current environment is the most misdiagnosed brain disorder on the face of the planet. It's still the most misunderstood. And I think that there's a lot of room and opportunity for treatment of OCD, but brain health in general to evolve. And I'll talk about that here in a second. But the catalyst that for me to become a figure in this space and just where my passion is derived from is my own personal lived experience. So, we were joking before you hit record on the episode. Your sister went to Purdue. I went to Purdue. I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, the cornfields of this country, the Midwest. And I had a typical childhood upbringing, man. I tell you, I went to school, I hung out with friends, and I played sports. That was my upbringing. When I graduated from high school, I went on to attend Purdue University and ended up graduating with a degree in economics from Purdue, just to frame things up. Because for me, I thought that I was going to go down the technology path. I thought I'm going to get into technology, a fast-paced, innovative environment, and I'm going to spend the next 3, 4, 5 decades trying to push technological innovations forward to further the planet and be aligned with that. And so when I first got down to Raleigh, I was working for one of the big tech companies, Cisco Systems. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be familiar. And everything was great for about the first 10 months of the program. And then right at about the 10-month mark, things started to change with the way that my brain functioned. And all of a sudden, I was waking up with sweaty palms, a dry mouth, racing thoughts, and a pounding heart. Felt like a drum line was in my chest. Now I'm 22 years old. I'm a 10-hour drive from home. I know that I don't like what I'm feeling. I also know that I don't want anybody else to know what I'm feeling, but I don't know what I'm feeling. Never been taught anything about mental health or what I like to say, brain health. And so in all of my infinite wisdom at 22 years of age, I said, you know what? My brain has flipped a switch, and I just needed to flip it back to the way that it used to be. Because in my head, I had just worn it out. Now, who I am and how I conduct myself in the world as a 31-year-old is very different from 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old Zach. When I was at Purdue, I was focused on socializing and partying. Honestly, even the academics came second to that. And so in my mind, as I'm down in Raleigh, I'm like, oh, I just wore my brain out. I was drinking too much. Back then I was smoking a lot of pot, and I was like, I just need to detox the system. And the way that I'm going to do this is by going to work, going to the gym, sitting in the steam room and sweating out all the toxins in my body, almost like, you would do before some sort of vacation or something, or detox after a vacation. Just get the system back in line. And so that's what I did for 31 days. The first month of 2016, all 31 days of January, I went to work, I went to the gym, I sat in the steam room, I sweat out all the toxins in my body. I didn't drink, I didn't go to any parties, I didn't smoke any pot, and I got results. The only challenge is that it wasn't the results that I was looking for. And by the end of the month, not only had the symptoms I told you and your listeners about get worse and intensify, that I now know was and is severe anxiety, but a second symptom had crept in, and that was depression. Now, up until that point, I had never experienced depression, and nor could I label it and know what it was that I was feeling. And the scariest part about the whole thing, Shemaiah, was that I had a plan, right? I went into 2016 with a plan, the way that somebody would go in and detox their body to feel better and get prepared. This was the surefire plan. I was going to knock out this little 31 days, get my old brain back, and we're good to go. And instead, I experienced the progressive worsening and deterioration of my brain health. All the while, I'm telling myself, oh, this is just part of the process. This is your brain just clearing everything out. It's going to get worse before it gets better. But then once it happens and you're all the way through, it's going to be good, even better than what it was. And now, in a matter of a couple of months, I've become this severely anxious, deeply depressed individual with no answers as to what is going on. And so I go into full-blown panic mode. And this is kind of the phase of this journey where I call Zach's Home Remedies, right? I'm reading personal development books. I'm like, let me read something that puts a mindset inside of my head that just wipes away this depression and anxiety, and it all just disappears. Back then, I just thought, oh, depression and anxiety is a choice. Like you can just will it away. I'm meditating more. I'm exercising at different times. I'm sleeping. I'm sleeping more often. I'm taking different types of supplements, and I'm clinging to this idea that I can flip my brain back to the way that it used to be. And for the sake of time, I'll tell your audience and you that within a couple more months, a third symptom had crept in, and that was thoughts of suicide. And now from the moment I woke up until the moment I went to bed, I was having thoughts of suicide. Now, this was quite the shock for me because I am a happy-go-lucky guy. I want to milk every second out of this life. I know that it's finite. I know that we get one shot at this, and I want to make it count. And that's how I felt back then. But in late 2016, there was a time in my life where when I thought 5, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, if this is how I was going to feel, this wasn't what I signed up for. And a deep sense of hopelessness washed over me. I felt like I've tried everything. I don't know what else to do. And everything keeps getting worse. And eventually I hit my rock bottom moment where I sincerely considered suicide as my only option. I won't get into the details of that today, but before taking any action, I decided that I would call my parents and I would confide in somebody, one person, before I took the action. And that phone call, Shemaiah, is what has completely changed the trajectory of my life and the mission and purpose behind my existence here on earth. You see, they didn't have all the answers, but they did encourage me to seek professional assistance. And in late 2016, I found a psychologist that knew what was going on with my brain and the symptoms that I was experiencing and the cognitions that I was struggling with. And I was diagnosed with a chronic brain disorder known as OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, where the core symptoms are severe anxiety, deep depression, and thoughts of suicide when left untreated. And so I immediately started talk therapy specific to OCD, which is known as exposure and response prevention, or ERP. And over the course of the next couple of years, through exposure and response prevention, talk therapy, lifestyle changes, and mindset shifts, I got back to a place where I never wanted somebody else to suffer in silence. I know at a visceral, deep level what it feels like to be pushed to the brink. And I know I hear a lot of people say suicide is selfish. And I understand that, actually, because before I was in that space and had felt it and experienced it myself, I would have thought the exact same thing. So I can't even fault people. That's why I'm in the business of information and spreading awareness so that people understand, because I think when we know better, we do better. And so I understand that. But when you are in that deep place of psychological and physiological pain, like it's hard to describe, Shemaiah, if you haven't been there. It feels like the only way out, because it is suffering in the truest sense. And so I never wanted somebody to go on that journey alone. I felt completely isolated, alone and afraid. I felt weak, weird, and different at the start of this journey. And my goal is just to get people to realize that our brain is the most important organ in our body, and there are actions and things that we can do to take care of our brains. And so I started speaking to college students and corporations around the country back in 2018. It was a part-time job, actually, while I was still at Cisco. And then I wrote and published my first book, You're Not Alone, which you alluded to, which is a guide for 18 to 24-year-olds to help them overcome anxiety and depression. It's everything that I wish I would have known at the start of my journey. And I'm proud to say the book has sold thousands of copies and is in over a dozen countries. And it's doing what it's supposed to do. And that's what makes me proud. There's not a week that goes by that I don't get a few messages from individuals who have read the book and taken something meaningful from it. I think that it's a valuable resource, and I wanted to my goal is to create low-cost resources in the space, because I think there's this belief system that mental health treatment can be expensive. And while certainly there's some truth to that, I think that there's an emerging part of this market where people like myself and others, other friends of mine in the space, are creating low-cost resources so that we can break down barriers, both with the stigma and with the access to resources, so that more people can take care of their brains. Because I think when we do that, Shemaiah, we evolve as a society. So I got to say, man, I get so excited to be on these podcasts. I'm just beyond grateful to be just in this space, one of the voices in it, just trying to move the culture forward. And I just feel every day I'm just blessed. I still live with OCD every day. I've learned how to meet my brain where it's at. I have a toolbox that I tap into every single day. I'm not a victim. I'm a victor. I don't look at myself as lesser than anybody. And yeah, I'm just proud of the mental health community. And I really appreciate people like you for holding space for us to talk about these important topics.
You listen to Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Zach Westerbeck. And everything you said, I think is very important, because, I have many guests who've been on my show, a lot of music artists. And during the time of the pandemic era, a lot of, I would say, just mental health was shaky for a lot of people. I mean, for the first time, for a lot of people, being isolated from loved ones, worrying about this and worrying about that, all these things you have to do to prep, make sure you're safe and that they're safe. And it was just a unique time. And I say that because, those quote unquote unique times, AKA those dark places in people's lives, they either grow from that and seek help and turn the page, or they get stuck and they read that chapter over and over and over again to where they don't see the light. And I say that because, depression is real. And I think sometimes it can be looked at as taboo, like, oh, you're not supposed to be depressed. You're supposed to be strong, especially if you have resources of two parents at the home, or, all these other additional resources that people might look at from the outside and say, well, why are you depressed? Like, you look like your life is perfect and you have the, quote unquote American dream. What's some of the things you try to illustrate to those on the outside looking in to help them understand more that depression can hit anyone and doesn't just hit, certain type of people?
Man, you gave me chills. Because I'm reminded so often. You took me back to 2016, 2017, and even parts of 2018, Zach, where, it is that classic, Shemaiah. I mean, you nailed it. It's the classic. You take a look at your life. And for me, this was certainly the case. And I understand that when you sort of break down the different things that people can go through in their childhood and the traumas that they can face and the hurdles that they have to overcome, there are a lot of hurdles that I was able to avoid. I still have two parents. They've been married for over 30 years, happily. I grew up in a happy household. We were middle class, but there was no financial insecurity. I knew that when I came home, there was going to be a meal on the table. And that plays a factor. I had a support system. I had a connected family unit and friend group. I had community. So I had a lot of the pieces that I think helped me in that recovery process. And that's why I try to take the blessings that I received so that I'm pouring from a full cup and I can help others. But you absolutely nailed it, right? Because I took a look at my life when I was feeling anxious and depressed, and I would literally say to myself, you're being a little bitch, man. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm just going to be transparent with your audience. Like, how dare you sit around here anxious for no reason, depressed for no reason? Have you taken a look at your life yet lately, man? You've got a job. You've got a girlfriend who's now my wife. I'm very, very proud that I married her. You have friends. You're working out. You have a loving family. What do you really have to be sad about? Give me a reason, Zach. Like, give me a valid reason and I'll let you off the hook. And what I realize now that I didn't know back then is that I was thinking about brain health in a vacuum, through a really narrow lens. And I'll tell you, Shemaiah, the reason why I use the term brain health over the term mental health is as a destigmatizing tool. The same way that we don't call our heart health soul health, because it's a tangible organ in our body and there's actions that we can take to improve its functionality, decrease things like heart disease, and improve its performance. This is the exact same thing with our brains, but I didn't think like that back then. I didn't think that the brain was the most important organ in our body and that it's tangible, just like the heart, and that there were actions that I could take to improve its functionality and decrease symptoms of stress, overwhelm, anxiety, depression, and thoughts of suicide. I knew nothing about neuroplasticity. To me, the brain was fixed. You were either mentally well or you were mentally ill. If you were mentally well, great. Your life was going to be amazing. It was all the benchmarks that you would expect from an individual. But if you were mentally ill, this meant that your life was doomed. You're going to live at home with your parents. You're crazy. You can't think right. It was all of the stigma, man, all of that. And so you could imagine when I left the psychologist's office with a chronic brain disorder diagnosis. On the one hand, absolutely stoked that I know what's going on with my brain. I'm relieved, but I'm also kind of disgusted because it challenged my belief of what it meant to be a mentally healthy person. I was, quote unquote, at the start, I was one of those people now. I was somebody who had to go to the psychologist's office. So I had all the stigma. I always want to make that clear. I had all of that stigma. But what I've learned through my journey is that I was thinking about brain health through a really narrow lens. And the reality is that every single human being, you, me, every single person that listens to your show, we all sit on a brain health continuum, and we fluctuate on this brain health continuum based on different factors in our lives, like our genetics, like the significant events of life. You brought up the pandemic. That's a significant event. And the ripple effect of everything that comes with that. And then the daily stresses of life. And until we start to, and I go more in depth in the book, but until we start to look at our brain and body as one, that our health is our brain and our body. They are not separated, but they are interconnected. And until we start to understand the various factors, all of the factors, one simple example being getting enough sleep, that not getting enough sleep will cause us to fluctuate on the brain health continuum, that it will impair our cognitions. It'll create an inability to retain information, to think more clearly, to deal with mood regulation, something so simple. And yet that is actually one of the biggest ailments in Western society. We don't get enough sleep. Now, that's just one of many factors, and I go more in depth in the book. But until we start to look at the brain and body as one, until we start to understand that all aspects of our life, genetics, significant events, daily life stresses, all impact where we sit on the brain health continuum, I think a lot of people will live like how I lived and how I thought about things, which was very binary, mentally well, mentally ill. You don't have to do anything to take care of your brain. It just shows up and it runs on autopilot and it does what it's supposed to do. And yet when you think about physical health, we know that's not the case. If you want to get a six-pack and, a big chest and you want to be able to run fast or jump high or have endurance, we know we have to train the body. We know that. We know that there's a diet component to that. But do we tie that to the brain as well? So for me, getting past that barrier of guilt around feeling depression and anxiety, to your earlier question, to tie it all back, the way that I was able to get past that was realizing that there are so many factors that impact your brain. And that's not just one.
Once again, man, we're talking to Zach, and man, we're going to have you on again. I don't know where these minutes be going, but it's like someone just drill a hole in the boat and they all disappeared, man. But all jokes aside, yeah, I think this is a very important topic. And I think a lot of young people, they need someone like yourself who can say, hey, I'm a human being. I'm not Superman. I'm not out here never being, negative. I have my moments, because we need more of those type of public figures and less of the clout chasers, because having this false identity that when you log in social media that you're witnessing someone's superficial perfect life, it makes things worse, in my opinion. I think a lot of people have this false reality idea, fantasy, if you will, that, okay, if I just do steps 1 through 5, like so-and-so, well, then I'm going to have a perfect, happy life like this person that I see on the other side of this profile. And I think that's far from the truth. I think people have to read books like yours, You're Not Alone, because I think a lot of people, disclaimer, not saying everyone, but I think a lot of people have a misconception of what happiness really is.
And I was one of them, Shemaiah. So, and I always say I'm not perfect, man. I'm a work in progress. But what you just touched on with social media, I think is so spot on. So spot on.
Because it's a filter, and it's not that I think a lot of us purposely wanted to be this false filter, but I think it's been a pressure of you won't get seen unless you act a certain way or present yourself a certain way. And I think people are starting to realize now we kind of want to see the real people who actually do struggle or have challenges and be vulnerable enough to show the world, your story versus the one you want me to believe through your filters. And when we take away those filters, that's the only way we can see the real person.
You're absolutely right. And the word that comes to mind for me is validation. And there's a large percentage of people, to your point, clout chasing, who they are seeking external validation because what they really want deep down inside is to feel love, to feel accepted, to feel like enough. And so they're going out and they're trying to seek that through the medium of social media, and they're saying things and doing things that they think will get them attention. And for me, this is just my journey and my truth. So I'm not saying that this is the only way to think, but this has worked for me, is going through this transition. Being rocked to my core was the catalyst to realizing that happiness is something that has to be cultivated. For me, again, has had to have been cultivated from the inside, and learning how to self-validate and be proud of myself and tell myself through my actions that I am enough. And so I think that you bring up a really, really good point with social media. And there's actually a linear correlation between time spent on social media and the likelihood that somebody experiences the onset of anxiety and depression. And I think it's because it doesn't matter how mentally fit and sound you are. Our brains, we just compare. And it's inevitable. So unless you are very intentional with how you engage with social media, I think that that's the inevitability. So I think you bring up a really good point, and I appreciate you sharing that. And I talk about that a little bit in the book too.
Once again, you get this book. It's out everywhere. You're Not Alone by Zach Westerbeck. You can go to zachwesterbeck.com. And like I said, the minutes just was like vapor on this show. It just kind of poof. But maybe have you back on if you have an event or something you do in the future. But great time talking to you, Zach. What's call to action outside getting your book that people can take to stay connected?
Absolutely, man. I would say there's a lot that's going to be going on this year in terms of development, and a lot of free resources for the OCD community. And then I should say free and low cost resources for the OCD community and for the collegiate community, which I serve primarily at this point in time. And so if you're interested in engaging with me, follow me on Instagram or TikTok at Zach_Westerbeck. It's just my first and last name. So if you search my first and last name, it should pop up on Instagram and TikTok. Let's hang out there, get to know me, get to know my heart, so that you know I'm not just some random guy trying to talk at you, but trying to walk with you in your journey, just like I'm walking in mine. And then if you want to learn more about those resources, Shemaiah already touched on it. ZachWesterbeck.com is where you'll be able to find everything. There's going to be community. There's going to be, like I said, low-cost resources to get you on your path. And then there's the book. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if there's anything I can do to help you and serve you, please do not hesitate to reach out.
Awesome, man. Well, like I said, make sure you go support what he does. He already said the website, but just in case you got wax in your ears, let me say one more time, is ZachWesterbeck.com. Easy to remember. Get the book, You're Not Alone. And really, you listen to this, you're not alone. So share this with someone who may feel like they're alone, and make sure that they have the tools and resources to help better themselves. So once again, thanks, Zach, for taking time out of your schedule to talk to I'm Refocused Radio today.
Thank you, Shemaiah. I appreciate you.